So our next session, we are going to have Frank Brown. He is he's a resident of North Minneapolis. He graduated with a BS in Business and Accounting from Central Washington University and an MBA from Seattle University. For nearly 30 years, Frank worked in large printing companies who often didn't treat their workers fairly, encountered his values of racial, social, and economic justice. Frank started Minutemen Press in the uptown neighborhood of Minneapolis. He lives his values in his business with the belief that employees are significant stakeholders and are key to a successful bottom line. Frank, during our little break there, we decided that we're going to play the video for you. So when you want us to play the video, just let us know.
Okay, I had one other question for you. Are other people able to speak during this session?
What they'll do is they will provide questions to me that I can ask you.
Okay.
Do you want me to stop you, or would you like them at the end of the presentation?
Just stop me. Okay.
Okay.
You know, I was hoping this was going to be more interactive, but that's okay.
Sorry about that.
All right. Let's see here. There. Wow, you can see me with a nice background. That really isn't the real background, in case you guys are wondering. I am not sitting out in Hawaii on a beach. So I'm Frank Brown. I am the owner of Minutemen Press Uptown in Minneapolis, the Uptown area. And let me give you a little bit about my background. I know Chris gave a little bit of an introduction there. I've been in printing for over 30 years, since 1988. I started off in Seattle, Washington, worked for a frozen food manufacturer, printing Flexo. And then I ended up in Albert Lea. I had got my MBA from Seattle University. It's a Jesuit school, and there was like no room to move up in that company. I saw that glass ceiling. And so I decided that, I'd look for a headhunter and see if I could get a job somewhere else in the country. Ended up in Albert Lea printing pull tabs. So that was a little offset sheet fed presses. And my background is in production control or scheduling and operations. So I worked there for a while. Also worked for a company called Embossing Plus. That's when I moved up to the cities. And that's foil stamping and embossing, die cutting. So a little bit of the finishing end. Also worked for Banta Catalog, if you guys remember the old Banta company, out in Maple Grove. I was managing their press room out there and did that for a little bit. And also took a break in 2008 when I got laid off, actually, and I did some organizing, for a nonprofit, doing some organizing around social, racial, and economic justice. And that's where a lot of my values and my background comes from. Besides, as you guys can see, I'm African American, so I've learned a lot just growing up, just being a person of color. And I can't see or identify who you guys are, but I'm going to assume that most people that are on here are not a person of color, and that's just an assumption, and it could be wrong, and that's okay. But knowing a lot of people that have been hired, being in the industry, I look around and I don't see too many people of color in the industry. So I'm just going to play the odds and say that. So I ended up organizing for 3 years, helped get Ban the Box passed. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that, where they asked the felon question on the job application. And, now they are no longer having that question on applications anymore. Me and some organizers and people helped get the law passed so there wouldn't be that question, because we felt that was discriminatory, especially with the disparate impact in the criminal justice system. So we thought that was a step forward. Ended up working for a company down in Shakopee, and I won't say the name of the company, but I was working in there, and they had a woman that's been there for over 25 years, and she was running, she was in the press room running presses, and she was training men how to run presses, and they were paying the men more than they were paying her. And for me, that just didn't sit right with my values. Also, they had people of color working in their assembly area. Some of them were, first-time Americans and stuff like that. And the supervisor of the warehouse walked up to the lead over there and said, "Hey, you need to get your monkeys working." Now, she got in trouble, okay? But, just that environment that I was working in was something that I had to get away from. And so I bought Minutemen Press in Uptown. It was previously owned by another person, a husband and wife were running it. They didn't have any employees, made it a union shop, and started paying livable wages because that's where my values were at, which was more than what the union had in their contract. And then, let's see, also I decided that I would, because I believe in second chances, that I would hire people with records. To me, a record isn't significantly important, as long as they're qualified to do the job. I think for us to really look at getting diverse in our workforce, we've got to understand where I'm coming from, or where people of color are coming from when they're trying to get jobs, and how they feel. Because I notice, all my friends say the same thing, why do you guys always talk about race? And, if you're a person of color, you talk about race because you experience it, because a lot of them say, well, we don't talk about that. And I'm just wondering why, only when you're around, because I experience it. And every person of color experiences race, okay? And we talk about it because it's important to talk about, so we can understand what's going on with you, how are they treating you, because, there's some concern. We live in a country that has structural racism. And let me read a definition of it. It's also known as systemic racism or institutional racism. It's a form of racism that is embedded as normal practice within society or an organization. It can lead to such issues as discrimination in criminal justice, employment, housing, healthcare, political power, and education, among other issues. So that's this definition. I do have a video to show. So Chris, I'm gonna ask you to show that YouTube video. There might be some ads in there or whatever, but we'll just have to skip them just so you guys can get an idea of where I'm coming from.
This is Jamal. Jamal is a boy who lives in a poor neighborhood. He has a friend named Kevin who lives in a wealthy neighborhood. All of Jamal's neighbors are African American, and all of Kevin's neighbors are white. Because Jamal's school district is mostly funded by property taxes, his school is not very well funded. His classrooms are overcrowded, his teachers are underpaid, and he doesn't have access to high-quality tutors or extracurricular activities. Kevin's school district is also funded by property taxes, so his school is very well funded. His classrooms are never crowded, his teachers are very well paid, and he has access to high-quality tutors and lots of extracurricular activities. Kevin and Jamal live only a few streets away from each other. So how come they're growing up in such different worlds with such different opportunities for success? The answer has to do with America's history of systemic racism. To understand it better, let's look at what life was like for Kevin and Jamal's grandparents. Decades after the Civil War, many government agencies started to draw maps dividing cities into sections that were either desirable or undesirable for investment. This practice was called redlining, and it usually blocked off entire black neighborhoods from access to private and public investment. Banks and insurance companies used these maps for decades to deny black people loans and other services based purely on race. Historically speaking, owning a home and getting a college education is the easiest way for an American family to build wealth. But when Jamal's grandparents wanted to buy a house, the banks refused because they lived in a neighborhood that was redlined. So Jamal's grandparents were not able to buy a home, and because colleges could prevent them from attending through legal segregation, their options for higher education were really scarce. Kevin's grandparents, on the other hand, got a low-interest loan to buy their first house and got accepted into a handful of top universities, which traditionally only accepted white students. This opened up a wealth of opportunities that they were able to pass on to their kids and grandkids. Even as late as the 1980s, an investigation into the Atlanta real estate market showed that banks were more willing to lend to low-income white families than to middle or upper-income African-American families. As a result, today, for every $100 of wealth held by a white family, black families have $5.04. A 2017 study confirms that redlining is still affecting home values in major cities like Chicago today. This explains how Kevin and Jamal inherited vastly different circumstances. Unfortunately, the story doesn't end there. A big part of systemic racism is implicit bias. These are prejudices in society that people are not aware that they have. Let's go back to Kevin and Jamal. Against all odds, Jamal manages to be the only student from his high school to get accepted into a great university, the same one that Kevin and his high school friends are attending. But after Kevin and Jamal both graduate, Jamal notices that his resume isn't drawing as much interest as Kevin's, even though they graduated from the same program with the exact same GPA. Unfortunately for Jamal, studies show that resumes with white-sounding names get twice as many callbacks as identical resumes with black-sounding names. Implicit bias is one of the reasons why the black unemployment rate is twice the rate of white unemployment, even among college graduates today. You can see evidence of systemic racism in every area of life. The disparities in family wealth, incarceration rates, political representation, and education are all examples of systemic racism. Unfortunately, the biggest challenge with systemic racism is that there's no single person or entity responsible for it, which makes it very hard to solve. So what can you do? The first thing you can do is work towards becoming more aware of your own implicit biases. What are some prejudices that you might hold that you're not aware of? Second, let's acknowledge that the consequences of slavery and Jim Crow laws are still affecting access to opportunity today. As a result, we should support systemic changes that create more equal opportunities for everyone. Increasing public school funding and making it independent from property taxes would be a great start, so that poor and wealthy districts can receive equal access to resources. Systemic problems require systemic solutions. Luckily, we're all part of the system, which means that we all have a role to play in making it better. Peace.
All right. That was just a review of what systemic racism is. And I've done my own research on it, and some of it included like the GI Bill. A lot of African Americans and people of color couldn't take advantage of the GI Bill because of redlining, so they couldn't get, you know, into better housing and things like that, even colleges. So historically, there's been things that have kept people, you know, from having access, and that affects everything down the road, families, and you know, grandkids, just like you saw in the video. And so I wanted to start off with that, just to kind of get you an idea of where I'm going to be coming from when it comes to hiring for diversity. So you guys kind of have a good idea of my background. Let me tell you about my company. My company, I have 86% women working for my company. You know, you guys may say that's phenomenal. I mean, there's only 7 people of us. And frankly, I'm the only male there, so all of them are women. And they do a great job, okay? In printing, you know, because a lot of people say, well, they can't do this job or that job. They can do any job. Women can do any job, just like anybody can do any job, okay? And 43% of the people that are working for me currently are people of color. That's a huge number, because I mean, when I walk into other companies in the printing industry, I don't really see too many people of color working there, and definitely not in management. When I was in management at some of the companies that I worked for, you know, I'd walk in a room, there'd be a meeting, and I'd be the only person of color in the meeting. And you know, a lot of us, you know, people of color, we talk to each other and say, yeah, we've been to those meetings where you walk in and you're the only one. And, you know, and then we ask ourselves why. You know, why aren't there more people of color in these meetings? There's more people of color getting education, getting college degrees. And so some of it is barriers, and some of it is qualifications. So I'm just going to use barriers and qualifications as an example, okay? Now, barriers are things like, okay, you don't have education, you don't have experience. and you don't have experience is probably the big one, okay? And I've run across that in hiring people. Oh, they don't have experience. I guess what I tend to do is I personally, I can say I'm a diversity manager, because I personally try to hire diversity. That's important to me. And that, I think, is a key quality if you want to change things, is to have a desire to change things. I've talked to other diversity managers, and I'm talking about people of color that get these jobs, that are like, oh, I'm diversity of purchasing, finding vendors. I'm trying to diversify a vendor, or I'm diversity in terms of hiring people to work for us. And I say, well, why aren't you hiring people of color? Why aren't you using minority vendors and stuff? A lot of them are just afraid. They're afraid that if they hire somebody who's a minority and they don't work out, or something goes wrong, that they'll lose their job. And that's kind of I'm going to say, I'm not sure if they're going to lose their job, but that's how they feel. And that's sad, because you're hired to create more diversity, but you're afraid to, because if you do, you're going to lose your job. That just let that sink in. In other words, nothing will change. Nothing will ever change, because we all have our prejudices, including people of color. We have our own prejudices because we've seen these things on TV, young black teenagers are gang members. You walk up to somebody, he's got his pants hanging down, you're like, okay, you don't know what to think. So, I mean, these stereotypes in our society really are programmed in our heads, because everybody categorizes people. It's a safety mechanism. When you're walking down the street, you have everybody in a category, and then only if you go beyond just looking at them and just open up and get to know them, will you be able to move them from one category to another and say, oh, well, he's okay. He's educated. Oh, he sounds okay. So those are the things that we have to overcome individually, and as somebody who's hiring, I'm hiring, and I'm looking at people in the way they come in. I mean, if they come in with their pants sagging, I think to myself, well, I probably don't want them working for me, because, that's just doesn't represent my company. One of the things that I have realized, though, is truly looking at people's experience in education, whether it's direct education, or direct experience, or whether it's higher education. Because when somebody has higher education, to me, that shows that they have the fortitude to complete something. And I've hired people that didn't have experience, and they're a person of color, but they had education, they completed something. So I started them off at a lower position so they could learn the industry. And they worked out. They're still working for me today, because they, number one, had whatever you want to call it inside, the guts, and the fortitude to start something and finish it. So I gave them the opportunity to do that. And that's all people are looking for, is opportunities. So those are the things that I think when I hire people that I look for, is this a possibility? Can I give this person an opportunity? I was in a meeting the other day, and let's talk about opportunities. And somebody suggested, well, maybe we should look at resumes and take the names off of, because as you saw in the video, the name Jamal may not get as many calls. But I beg to differ, because if we're in the printing industry, and we take the names off and we start just looking for experience, there's no people of color in the printing industry. So we're not going to find any. We're going to pick people that aren't people of color, because most likely that's what they are, because there's nobody here. So I think we need to take affirmative action if we really want diversity. Affirmative action means looking, if you see somebody with a different name, why not give them an interview? Why not give them an opportunity and see if they can qualify for the job, or if you can give them a chance or give them a lower position so they can start off and learn printing. Printing is a skill. And the only way we're going to open doors for people of color, and in particularly African Americans, is to give them entry-level positions and let them learn a skill. You know, that's all our community is asking for. Okay, I see I have a question regarding people with records, criminal records. I've had 3 people out of 10 people. I've hired probably 10 people with criminal records, okay? And 3 out of 10 worked out. It's not a high statistic, but 3 out of 10 worked out. And they ended up, you know, finding a job, moving on, but 3 out of 10 worked out. And so here's what I found out when it comes to hiring people with criminal records. Education is important. The 3 people that worked out had education. You know, they had, you know, beyond high school education, they had an advanced degree, you know, whether it was a 2-year degree or a 4-year degree or a 6-year degree. You know, everybody, you know, they're having hard times finding jobs because they have a record. But I find that giving them an opportunity, let me make that 4, because I just thought of one other person that worked out too. So 4 out of 10. That's 40%. I don't know if that's good or bad, you know, overall, but to me, that's a good record for, you know, giving people second chances. You know, they learned the industry, they did good, and they moved on to another job. And I'll say this: giving people second chances is just like giving people of color a chance without experience is a cost. It is a cost in the short run, you know, because you're going to get people in, and they're not going to, they won't be able to learn, or they're not going to be able to do the job, or they have other issues. Okay, and that's pretty much for everyone. Okay, but even more so for people with records, I'll say in particular, because a lot of them have, you know, substance abuse issues that they got to deal with. And one way that I work around that is, number one, you know, I ask them if they're part of a program. I mean, I ask them that direct question: are you in a program? In other words, are you taking care of yourself? Do you have a support system? You know, and check on those kinds of things. And I found that people, number one, who do have a support system and are in a program usually do better. The 4 people that did better were in a program and they had a support system, plus the education, that helped. So hiring people with records is not, it should not be a big barrier, and it hasn't been a big barrier for when I hire people. I can see that, you know, and I've like I said, I've worked for organizing around criminal justice issues at a nonprofit, and let me tell you some of the statistics that we found. And I kind of double checked my statistics. Okay, one of the statistics is after 7 years that somebody has been out and they've been crime-free, they haven't been arrested at all, the likelihood of them committing another crime is less than everybody else. That's just the way it is. In other words, people learn their lessons. You know, oh, you've been out for 7 years? Oh, you haven't been in any trouble, you know? Oh, so you've learned your lesson. I'll give you a chance. You know, I can say 2 out of the 4 people had been out for 7 years, of the successful people had been out for 7 years. And to me, it wasn't really taking a chance. You know, imagine them struggling during those 7 years, number one, to get a job, find housing, to make ends meet, you know, and to get another job, find housing, make ends meet, because it's tough, you know, for them. I've mentored some people in some programs, and it's tough, you know, because nobody, you know, once they find out that you have a record, it's like, okay, you know, they stop listening to you. HR, human resource people, which I guess I'm not a human resource person, I own a company, but human resource people, they say tend to, once they say that you know, they have a record, they suddenly lose interest. You know, they talk to them, they tell them, you know, how, you know, they have a bachelor's degree or whatever, you know, they have experience, and then they say, well, but I'm going to disclose that I have a record. You know, I made a mistake. and suddenly the interest goes away, you know. And you know, I guess I can say I may get it because, you know, as a human resource manager, you might feel, wow, if I give him a chance, he might mess up, and then somebody's going to say, well, why did you hire him? Okay. You know, it's a risk. It is a risk. But, you know, my question is, why would they ask you that question because he has a record and not ask you that question if they don't have a record? Because there are many people we hire that don't have records, and you got to ask yourself, why did I hire him? You know? So I don't think a record really makes a difference. It hasn't made a difference in my hiring, you know. I'll say that I did learn from experience, because when I first opened my business, you know, I was trying to be too good of a person, and I was just hiring people with records just to hire them because, you know, I thought, yeah, I'm going to try to help people. But, you know, I've had to learn my lesson that, you know, I own a business and I have to run a business. And I got to find people that can do the job. So I'm not saying, so in other words, I'm not telling you to go out and hire people with records. I'm saying, let's make sure that if people cross your path that have a record, but they have qualifications, they have some education, you know, or, you know, and they're honest about their record. That's the other thing. They got to be honest about it. You know, if somebody's trying to hide it, then they're really not ready to participate in society if they want to hide it. You know, I know society's pretty judgmental and rough on people with records, but, you know, a strong person is able to say, hey, I made a mistake in the past, but you know what? I'm a different person. I've changed who I am. This is what I've done. I've went through a program. You know, I haven't had any alcohol, and, you know, I've been alcohol free for 7 years, you know, and I learned from my mistake, and I haven't gotten in any trouble. Just give me a chance, you know. And the thing is, a lot of them are afraid to talk to HR people that are hiring, you know, the hiring manager, because it's like, I'm going to tell them that, and they don't think they're going to get a chance. And the truth is, I think reflect back on yourself. Would you give somebody a chance if they say, well, I made a mistake over 7 years ago, okay? You know, and some of it, you might say, well, what did you do? You know, and then you might say, well, there's certain crimes that I wouldn't rehire, or, you know, I wouldn't hire. But I think, you know, when I was doing my organizing for second chances, we were pushing, if it's not related to the job, why would you not hire them? Okay. Because let's you know, if somebody embezzled money and you're hiring for a bank, you know, you may not want to hire them. But, you know, if somebody embezzled money and you're looking for somebody to run a folder because they learned how to run it in prison, why wouldn't you hire them? You know, they made a mistake, you know, and they're qualified for the job. Like I say, I'm gonna say I've done pretty well, other than when I first started off. And I'd say 5 out of the 6 people that didn't work out when I first started out, and I didn't like have my system down on how I hire people with records. Okay, and, you know, you're gonna find in our criminal justice system that there's a huge disparity, you know, of people of color that have records, you know, because, you know, I live in North Minneapolis, and I'm gonna say it like they say, the popo is out there trying to get us, you know, the police, you know, and they're getting records quicker than anything. They're more likely to get arrested for, you know, a minor crime such as, let's say, smoking marijuana. Then they're likely to get arrested for that than, let's say, a college student who's smoking marijuana. You know, the cop might say, well, yeah, I get it. You know, you're in school, you know, kids make mistakes, you know, so they'll let it go. But they will not let it go in my community. They will not let it go up here in North Minneapolis. And, you know, call it systemic racism, because that's what it is. So what can we do? What can we do? If we want more diversity in our companies, what can we do? Is there a cost? In the short term, yeah, there's a cost. That's being really honest about it. As a business owner, I realize there's a cost, and if I want to do the right thing, if I want more diversity, then that's what I'm going to have to do. I'm going to have to pay a little bit of cost, okay? So in the long run, is it going to be helpful? Well, I know there's statistics saying that the makeup of the country is changing to where there's going to be more people of color, and the actual European races are going to be in the minority eventually as time goes, probably within the next generation. Even in Minnesota, the case is moving that way. So one thing about people of color, we tend to support each other's businesses when we can. I got a question here, so I'll take it. I'm sorry, could you put that question up there again? I just missed it. Where would I find diversity? Was that the question?
It says, where have you found the diverse candidates that you've hired?
Oh, okay. And let me touch on this question with a comment too, because I hear this a lot. Well, we can't find any. And I'm in my community. It's like they never come out here. So the where to find them is here in the community. Is actually, if you really want to be futuristic looking, is in the high schools. Go to the high schools and take on an intern. Take on an intern, during the summer, a summer intern. I don't care if you have them filing or doing something like that. Let them start feeling what it's like to work and be in a work environment, besides a McDonald's where it may not be as serious of a work environment, but expose them to a real work environment, or even expose them, if you can put them on some machines or some hand bindery, put them there. But that's one place to find them. I know there's Summit Academy on Olson Memorial Highway, and I have yet to see the printing industry go to my fraternity brother, who's the executive director there, and ask him, hey, we want to get more diverse workforce. What can we do? Is there a program we can help you guys set up so we can get more people trained to get into printing? That's another place. I'm in the community, so I got to say, this is where I find people, and I find friends of friends, to hire. So in the communities where you're going to find people, you're going to have to come out to the community, job fairs. I know they've had some job fairs. They had some job fairs at the unemployment office right there on Broadway, West Broadway. I didn't see anybody from the printing industry. All I saw was a bunch of nonprofits. It's like, is that the destiny of African Americans in North Minneapolis, just to work for a nonprofit? And there's not too many jobs there anyway. So how can we reach out to the African American community? You got to be here. You got to come into the African American community, or else it's going to be tough. It's going to be real tough. I'll tell you, my website and my advertisement saying that I believe in second chances right there on my website gets people applying for jobs that have records and don't have records, because they say, wow, that's a good thing. And you know what? You're helping the community. What can we do? I'm looking for a job. Can I fill out an application? It's sometimes it's just our image, because word of mouth is important in our community. People know, about a company. I bet you nobody has heard of, and I'm just throwing a name out of the top of my head. I'm not picking on anybody, but nobody knows Bolger Printing in my community. They know Minutemen Press Uptown. They probably don't know hardly direct names of any printing company. They might not know Smythe. I don't think any of them know many printing companies. So to get people in our community, or to get people of color, you have to go to the community and you have to talk to people. I know to get people with records to apply, I went to the halfway houses. I said, hey, I talked to some of the counselors there. I said, hey, do you know anybody that is looking for a job that might have some printing experience or might have some education that might be looking for a job. And that's how I found people with records. And it's been fairly successful, very direct. So hopefully that answers your question, and it's to get out in the community. I'd love to see the printing industry Midwest, PIM, do a job fair, hopefully when COVID's over, do a job fair out in North Minneapolis where the printing industry, wanting to be diverse, says, hey, we want to be diverse, so we're going to do a job fair in North Minneapolis, and come on out, or in East St. Paul, and come out and have a job fair where people can maybe you can hire 1 or 2 people and just give one person an opportunity. It's tough. I'm going to say it's tough because not everybody's qualified, not everybody, and I push back on my community, trust me. Not everybody's ready to work, so I do a pushback. What was the next question? I'm sorry.
Frank, okay, so build off of that, and then also I just wanted to let you know that we have a poll that we can launch asking people on that are attending if they have any policy on hiring second chance people that Steve will launch shortly. And my other question for you is, someone says that they don't have a problem finding people you're suggesting, but how do you get them to accept the job offer or getting them to stay? What can people do?
To get people to stay, I think if you treat people well, treat them nice, treat them right, pay them what they deserve, they stay with jobs. Right now, what I'm finding is people are moving from job to job, trying to make more money, kind of like what I was doing back in maybe the 80s or 90s. No, well, not in the 80s, but definitely in the 90s, where people are always working a job and then trying to move on. One of the things I do look for also is how long can they hold a job? Have they been in a job for at least 2 years? 3 years is preferable, because if somebody can't hold a job and they're just in job for every 6 months, what can you do to hold them? There's probably nothing, absolutely nothing you can do to hold them, because they're just not that person to stay in a job, And that doesn't just go for people of color. That goes for, millennials and a few other, people in general that seem to just hop from job to job. What was the next question? I'm sorry.
Well, first off, I think we'll close the poll because we kind of can see, basically it shows that most of our companies are saying that they are hiring second chance people. So I guess that is a pretty good thing. I want to know, Frank, how should you suggest our HR people who are most attending today talk to their leadership on their hiring practices? Like you've said, make the hiring practices better for even looking at resumes. And what would you suggest an HR person does to get leadership involved in the hiring process?
I'm going to say that being honest is probably the main thing. And I try to be honest with everybody here because there's risks, as a business owner. And, so, if you want to approach, upper management regarding hiring people with records or hiring people of color, you got to say there's going to be some risk. And we're going to have to take, if that's what we really want to do, okay, we're going to have to take affirmative steps to do it. In other words, if I have two candidates, one's a person of color, and I've made this choice probably a lot, okay? Not when I say a lot, just enough times when I have to choose. I have a person of color and I have another candidate who's not a person of color, who's white. And I look at I look at their resumes, I interview them. Number one, I'll interview them, okay? Sometimes I automatically interview. If I look at a name, I say, oh, this person's probably Hmong, and this is probably a white person. I'll interview both of them, because as long as they both have qualifications that, are related. Like when I was hiring for my customer service person, I looked at somebody's resume. They didn't have printing customer service. They worked for nonprofits. They did some organizing, some filing, some phone answering. The other person, 7 years of printing customer service. Wow. This is like, should it be a no-brainer? It is a no-brainer, okay, for me, because I know what my goals are for my company. So I interviewed both, and frankly, as long as the person was qualified for the job, I hired her. And I didn't take the one that had 7 years experience. She had more experience, and she was definitely qualified, but so was the other person. But I want to diversify, so I'll hire the person of color because I want to diversify. So in other words, you got to be really, you got to say we want to do this, and when those opportunities come up, you got to take them. I found somebody who's qualified, somebody who I think will work out. And by the way, she is working out great. She's an excellent customer service person. She's working out really good. And it's like, just give somebody an opportunity, a chance, and that's all you have to do. And like I say, you're taking a risk. So when you're talking to upper management, say, it's going to involve some risk taking. And there may be some costs in the short run because, we have to train her in printing and other things, what paper is and all the other stuff. There's some cost in the short run, but in the long run, we'll be able to meet our company goals if that's our company goals. By the way, I the result of the survey, call me cynic, I find that hard to believe. But maybe we do. Maybe a lot of people do hire people with records. Okay. I just know. Well, maybe the people that I see in the halfway houses, people I talk to, in some of my circles, they don't get hired, and they keep saying, maybe I should start steering them towards printing industry. But again, you got to minimize the risk for upper management by saying, hey, this guy has an education. So he can complete some. Look, he's held a job. He's been out for 7 years. Find the reasons why to hire somebody with a record, as opposed to when they say, I have a record, you shut them down, don't look any further at them. That is the biggest mistake that HR people make. They shut them down and they don't take any further look at that person. And they don't look at, why should I hire him? They look at, I'm not going to hire him. So when you go to upper management, just say, hey, like I say, there's a risk. Well, this guy has a record, but he's been out for 7 years. He told me he was honest, and just say, and if you want to screen him and see what you feel, and we can go with that gut feeling, because sometimes, people want to have their own personal feeling and get a feel for the person. And a lot of times that's what HR and frankly hiring is. For me, because I'm not an HR person, it's a crapshoot. Okay. And I don't know if you guys feel that way too, but it is a crapshoot. Sometimes you hire people and they're late all the time. They're on their phone it's like they're just, for me, it's a crapshoot, but I think I have certain rules of thumb that have worked out for me. Okay. Because sometimes you hire somebody that seems like they're going to be so perfect, so right. And then they just don't work out,
Frank, are you, what are the hours of operation at your facility?
Okay, so we're a union shop. Okay, like I think I said that earlier. And our hours of operations are from 7 in the morning to 6 p.m. So we have 2 shifts. We run one from 7 to 4, 1 hour lunch. And the other one we run from 9 to 6, 1 hour lunch. So it's kind of like a little bit of a shift, but it's fairly traditional. We do have a requirement that 6 hours a day is considered full time, and I had to negotiate that because just in the future, I imagine myself hiring, let's say, a woman who has kids, maybe a single mom that has kids, and she has to, be with them like you know, a certain time during the day to pick them up from school and all the other stuff. So if they worked 6 hours, that would be good. They could drop them off early in the morning, work 6 hours, and be there to pick up their child at the bus stop. You know, and that's an accommodation. You know, a 6 hour day. And to be honest with you, and I'll be really honest with you, being able to go 6 hours is a blessing. It's a good thing because, you know, you all know that the printing industry is up and down. There's times you have to lay people off or, you know, cut their hours anyway, you know. So a 6 hour day, as long as, when I hire people, I say full time is 6 to 8 hours. So they know in advance. And so it's not like I'm cutting them below full time and they still get their benefits. And it works out for me, you know, because I have my constraints. I'm a franchise, that's a constraint, and the union, that's another constraint. So I try to operate within those constraints to, you know, promote my values and run a good business and hopefully make a profit. You know, let me just say this, okay? Value-oriented businesses and being one has worked out great for me. When I bought my business, sales was around 200,000 a year. You know, they weren't doing much. And after 3 years, I had it over $1 million. So having values and presenting to my community, those values works for me. Because me being an African-American man, I'm a leader in my community as a business owner, and that's how I got to present myself, because that's the way it is. There's not too many African-Americans that are business owners, at least not at not at the level that I'm at, you know. So was there any more questions?
Frank, you work with your local government, and with that, it would be the city of Minneapolis, but you work with the city of Minneapolis in finding ways to hiring minorities and assistance, possibly. I know a big issue for some of our members have talked about transportation and getting to facilities. Have you ever heard about companies reaching out to figure out how to get bus routes closer to their locations? Do you work with your local government?
Fortunately, I'm on Hennepin Avenue, and
Yes.
so I really haven't worked with anybody regarding transportation. I was, however, considering, you know, this was before the riots, I was considering moving my company to North Minneapolis on Broadway, but I decided not to do that after the riots because there's just too much risk for me personally. So I wouldn't be able to do that. I saw another question just recently, and I had an answer in my head. What was the last question that was asked?
Let's see. So I think you've covered all the questions that I've gotten in here.
Really? I thought I saw one pop up just right when you asked me that question. There was one up.
I think there was one question about this person who was sharing that their problem is not finding employees in need of second chances, but getting them to accept the job offer or getting them to stay. What can they do?
Right.
Okay.
Okay.
We actually covered that question.
Oh, did you cover that one? I apologize.
Well, was there one but right before that one then? Because I saw something up there.
Let me go up past that.
Something about human resources.
Yeah, that was the one about how human resources gets leadership involved in hiring practices.
Oh, okay. Okay. I thought there was, well, and let me say this, when it comes to human resources, you know, being a small business owner, I use Oasis and Paychecks. They handle my human resource issues because, you know, I got to run a business, you know, just like I have an accountant that does accounting. You know, small businesses, you got to do what you got to do, but whatever you can pay somebody else to do, I do. And I haven't had any issues as far as, you know, discrimination or anything like that, which is a good thing. As far as back to that question about keeping people, it's tough. You know, I guess the guys that I have kept, you know, see, they had their personality was such that they wanted something beyond the job I was giving them. You know, I was just giving them stability so they could move on. And that seemed to work out well as far as keeping people. If they they say, I got an education, I think I'm going to do this, I want to get some experience, but maybe after 2 years, I'm going to be looking for something else. Or if you got a place for me to grow, like in the sales, I can do that. So, I guess either showing that you have some opportunity that's beyond where you're starting them, especially somebody with an education, because education is, especially for somebody with a record, that's very valuable. That's real valuable, to them, and it's valuable to anybody else, and it's like, sometimes that record tends to hide the education, like, oh, you got a record, so the education doesn't count. But to them, that's one of the things that they have to say, I'm of value. I have an education, and and they usually have more goals and, to continue on and do that. I'd say, frankly, I think all of my successful people that had records had an education, all of them did, whether it was a master's degree, bachelor's degree, or whatever. And they continued on, moved on to better jobs, better positions. So, so that's another criteria you might want to look at, but really when you make that decision, you are taking a chance, you are taking a risk, and it's up to you whether you think that risk is worth it. But like I said, you take a risk when you hire anybody, because, you're asking me, how do we get them to stay on? How do you get your other people to stay on? That's another thing. I'm sure, unless you guys can tell me that, oh, we don't have problems keeping anybody to stay on, I would be surprised. Anybody without a record to stay on, or anybody, period. Unless they've been in printing for a long time and that's their career. Those are the only people that I know that really stay on. Want to discuss Diversity Coalition? Who? You? Chris?
Frank, I was going to ask you though first, you are now an owner, but when you worked at those other places, how did people ever talk to you about wanting to get their businesses more diverse, or did they just never talk to you about color?
I would say every place I've worked, they never talked about color. I guess it's a risky thing for HR, or anybody in a company. Once you say, oh, we might offend him, and then suddenly we got this lawsuit, I'm glad I'm a person of color. I can talk about race and not worry about anybody suing me necessarily. I would just say necessarily, there's a caveat. But no, they never brought it up about hiring more people of color or anything like that, or wanting to be diverse. But it's been, it really hasn't been that long. It's been 6 years probably since, I was out there. And I think if you want to grow your diversity, you hire people who are friends of people.
Yes.
That I've seen people grow their diversity that way, and that's key, because a lot of people will not recommend somebody that they know is going to fail, because if they do, it reflects on them. So if you want to grow your diversity, that's one approach, and that means you will have to talk to them. You'll have to say, we're hiring for, your department, another customer service person. Do you have any friends or anybody like that? And if you want, I would say, just be honest, just say, and, we're trying to get more diverse, so do you have any friends, and as I guess maybe the worry might be, oh, well, what, you think just because I'm black, I have nothing but black friends or something like that, which I don't know if they'd say that, but, just saying, I'm just asking, and sometimes some of these rules are just so stupid, I'll just say, but we got to fall within them. I don't think anybody would say, oh, you think because I'm black, I have black friends. No, I thought because you're African-American that you might know somebody who we can hire. If they're African-American, I'm letting you know that we're trying to diversify. Okay. I'm not asking you if you have black friends. I'm asking you if you have friends, and I'm letting you know we're trying to diversify. Two different things. Okay. And leave it at that.
I think that is a great point, and I know of employers that really do use that to their benefit, and I would suggest all HR do that, is to find the diversity in your company and start asking them for recommendations on who you should hire, for sure.
Yes.
Frank, this has gone so fast. We're now 4 minutes to 11 o'clock. Do you have any last moments of word of wisdom? You do know that we are started a diversity coalition, which you are helping us run. I don't know if you wanted to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I guess I can. You know, I think it's great that PIM is working on more diversity in the industry, and this here is another piece of it, and you know, it's a good start. And you know, it's challenging, and I think the only thing that really is going to make a difference is affirmative. I don't want to use the word affirmative action because that got such a bad rap in the 80s. But that's the only time that I saw advancement for people of color. But we're going to need affirmative, you know, programs to really advance this, if that's what we really want. Because we can say we want diversity and we're just going to take what comes, or we're really going to take affirmative steps to make it happen, because that's what it's going to take. I've taken affirmative steps, and it's happening for my company. Well, if you guys take some affirmative steps, it can happen for yours. And I think being part of the PIM Diversity group is helpful. You know, join it, learn something, see how you can make it better. Because, you know, everybody should come to the table or see what you can, you know, add to it. You know, we're working on several things in my subcommittee, and we're trying to really open up people's eyes, because like I say, people can be blind. They think what they're doing is helpful, but when you look at the bigger picture, it may not be helpful. So we really got to look at what we're doing. Okay, like that example I told you about. Oh well, I won't put any names on the resumes, and then I won't be using my prejudices. Well, you are, because basically the qualified people are all going to be white because they're the only ones in the industry. That's what you're going to judge people on. Okay, but if you want to take affirmative steps, hey, Jamal, wow, he's got some experience, but he hasn't been in printing, but this other person's been in printing. I think these are transferable skills that he can use in our industry. We can use them. So let's give him a chance. Okay? That's all I got to say. People need an opportunity. All right?
Thank you so much, Frank. We appreciate you taking the time today to give us some really good information on working on adding diversity and inclusivity to our workforce. I appreciate it, and I think we all appreciated hearing you today.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Take care. We are now going into another 10-minute break. When we come back, we'll listen to Tom Revenue on some great information, and talk to you in 10 minutes. Thanks.